All right, everybody, this is 9.0, the product and sum puzzle. All right, so our last unit, we talked about factoring out the greatest common factor. All right, but in this unit, we're going to be focusing a lot on something that looks like this. This is called a standard form of a quadratic. So we talked in our last unit about how if you have a degree of 2, then we know that it's a quadratic. And then we have 3 terms, so this is a trinomial. Right, so a quadratic trinomial. And we're going to learn how to factor something like that. It's going to be a little different than what we did for our last unit where we just factored out the greatest common factor. But we'll get into that, I think, in 9.2. But this game that we're covering today, this puzzle, will really help you when we get to that. So let's just look at this together. So it says, I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 32 and add to 12. Okay, so basically we want these 2 numbers. One is when we put those in, you get 32. If we multiply them, we get 32. And if we add those same 2 numbers, that give you 12. So I'm going to go over this one, and then maybe I'll have you try the other one, all right? So, stop. There we go. Okay, so what can multiply to 32? What adds up to 12? So if you're ever stuck, what you're going to want to do is you're going to write down all the factor pairs for 32. So I know that 1 goes into 32, and if we multiply that, what we would need to multiply to 32 would be 32, right? Because 1 times 32 is 32. All right, I know that 2 goes into 32. And one way you can do this is just grab your calculator and just do 32 divided by 2. And if it gives you a nice answer, like no decimals, then we know that it's one of the factors. So 32 divided by 2 gives us 16. And then we could try 3. All right, does 3 go into 32? Just put in your calculator 32 divided by 3, and it will give you a decimal. So 3 isn't one of the factors. We could try 4. So I think 4 works. Would that be 9? Yeah, 9. No, that's 36. So 34 and 8. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And then we could try 5. 5 doesn't go into it, or 6, or 7, but 8 goes into 32, but we already have 8. Okay, so we wrote down all of the factor pairs for 32. All right, so those are your choices that could go in these spots. Okay, so 1 and 32 does give us 32, but 1 plus 32 does not give you 12. Okay, so both of the 2 numbers need to satisfy the top and the bottom equation. Okay. So maybe we'll try 2 and 16. Well, 2 and 16, that does multiply to 32, but 2 plus 16 gives you 18. So that doesn't work either. So the last choice we have is 4 and 8. 4 times 8 is 32, and 4 plus 8 is 12. So that would be your answer. That would be our 2 things that would work, okay? So we'd just maybe say 4 and 8. Those are the 2 numbers that make that work. Okay, so that's basically, I guess I read the answers right there, but hopefully that explained it a little better. Okay, so why don't you try this one? If you're still struggling, just go along, and we'll do some more examples. And I think with practice, you'll get it. Okay, so we need to multiply to 6. So again, we can think of what are the things that multiply to 6? Well, you got 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and then the next number would be 3, but we already have 3. So that means we have all of the factor pairs. All right, so 1 and 6 could work. Oh, but wait, now we have this negative. So the thing with this puzzle is that your numbers can be positives or negatives. Okay. So if I need to have a negative number, then I'm going to need to take like the smaller number minus the bigger number. So like if you did 1 minus or plus a negative 6, that would give you a negative 5. But that's not going to give us what we need. Oh, I think I made a mistake here. I think I did. I think this needs to be a negative. Dagnabbit. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So, yes. Okay, so but 2 and 3, that should work, but maybe the 3 would need to be a negative. So negative 3 plus 2 does give us a negative 1, and negative 3 times 2 does give us negative 6. So sorry about that. I need to fix that. Too bad I already printed my notes. Okay. All right, so sometimes they could be negative. All right, so here are some strategies on being able to figure out what the two numbers are. So first off, focus on the multiplication. Write down factor pairs. So we want to focus on this first. So we would like write down our factor pairs. So 1 and 15. And then 2 doesn't go into it. 3 and 5. And then the next number would be 4, but 4 doesn't go into 15. And then 5, but we already have 5. So those are the factor pairs. So focus more on the multiplication and make sure you write down factor pairs. All right, then it says numbers can be positive or negative. So we kind of talked about that up above as well. So keep that in mind. I'm trying to think of any examples. So if you ever have a negative for either of those, then either one or both of your numbers will be negative. So just keep that in mind. All right, we'll have an example of both of those as we go along. It says if the multiplies to number is positive, we'll get into that. I don't want to have too much at one time. We'll talk about that as we go. So let's do a couple more examples. So we know that the factor pairs for 15 are 1 and 15 and 2 and 5. Okay, and we need to be able to add or subtract to give us 8. Okay, so this is a good example. Since if both are positive, then we know that both of the numbers are going to be positive, right? If one is negative and we did multiplication, we'd need to get a negative. And if both of the numbers were negative, then we would know that that would be negative, okay? So this one we know that both of the numbers are positive, and 3 and 5 would make that work, okay? Because 3 plus 5 is 8. All right, here's another example. Both of these numbers are positive, so we know that both of the numbers have to be positive, okay? So again, factor pairs. Again, I think as you get along, you won't need to write down factor pairs, but I think it's a good start, okay? Okay, so I got 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, 4 doesn't, 5 doesn't, and then we're back to 6. Okay, so those are all the factor pairs. And again, just start with 18 and then divide it by 1, and that would give you 18. So those are like those two things, and then we do 18 divided by 2. That gives you 9. Again, those are the factor pairs, would be 2 and 9. And then 18 divided by 3 gives you 6. So that's like your factor pair as well. Okay, so that's how you can do it with your calculator. All right, so those are our numbers. Which ones would give us 11? Looks like 2 and 9. So 2 times 9 is 18, and 2 plus 9 is 11. All right, so why don't you pause and give this one a try? So those are the factor pairs. It has to give you 5. So here we go. It's got to be 2 and 3. You might be tempted to say, ooh, well, 1 and 6, if you did 6 minus 1, so if you did 6 minus 1, that would give you 5. So if you did 6 minus 1, that would give you 5. But 6 times a negative 1 would give us a negative 6. And it has to be the same sign. So those are not the same. Okay? So that would not work. All right, so I think we're going to talk about some negative things now. Actually, I think I wanted to talk about, yeah, let's just do it that way, okay? So now we have two negatives. If two negatives, then we know that one has to be a negative, one has to be a positive. Basically, if the multiplies part gives you a negative, then one has to be positive, one has to be negative, right? That's the only way you can multiply two things and give you a negative. If they were both positive, then two positives gives you a positive, and two negatives, if you multiply, give you a positive. So one of these has to be negative, one has to be positive. So factor pairs for 3, only choices are 1 and 3. All right? And then when you add or subtract, it's got to give you negative 2. So if you did 3 minus 1, well, that would give you positive 2. So that's not going to work. But we could do 1 minus 3, okay? And you don't need to have the plus here. It could be addition or subtraction, okay? So if you want to have that be minus 3, okay? So then those would be the two things that would make that work. Because 1 times negative 3 gives you negative 3, and 1 minus 3 gives you 2, negative 2. So 1 and negative 3. All right, here's another example. This is telling us that we know that one of the numbers is negative, and this is telling us that we're going to do our bigger number minus our smaller number. Okay, so factor pairs for 20, you got 1 and 20, 2 and 10. 3 doesn't go into it, 4 and 5, and then we got 5, but we already got 5, so we got all of them. All right, and it has to give you 8. One of them has to be negative, so, I mean, there's no way you could make that be 8. No matter if it's positive or negative, adding or subtracting, we can't get that to work, okay? Same as 4 and 5. 4 plus 5 gives you 9, or if you did 5 minus 4 gives you 1. So it's got to be this one. And again, one of them's got to be negative. So we'd have to do 10 minus 2. So 10 minus 2 gives you 8. And then 10 times negative 2 would give us negative 20. And again, don't worry so much about like if it says it's positive or adding, okay? So that would be our answer. So 10 and negative 2. All right, last one, okay? So I think I just wanted to talk about kind of comparing C and F. So they look very similar, except that we have a negative 6, and that's the problem that we did above. So we came up and said that 6 times negative 1 gives you negative 6, and 6 plus a negative 1 gives us 5. So you've got to be careful sometimes with those signs. All right, so I think that is it for today. On your homework, let me see if I can grab that really quick. Homework. Okay. So homework is going to be similar, okay? So for these first 4, I want you to write down factor pairs. So that's just what we were already doing. It's just part of answering the puzzles below, okay? So write down factor pairs. What goes into 32, basically? So you could do 1 and 32. You could do 2 and, actually we did this one on our notes. So refer that to your notes, okay? And then here we got these where I want you to find the 2 numbers that fit both criteria, okay? So if you want to write down this, like that times that equals negative 2, and that plus that equals 1, you're welcome to, but when we're all done, we should say, oh, our answer is going to be number and number, similar numbers they are, okay? All right, again, you can check your odds on the back if you want to. All right, have a good day. We'll see ya.